Thank you. Sorry, I'm fashionably late, or at least late. I talked to Mr. Scott, I think I can call him that. I talked to Mr. Scott earlier this year, and he said, maybe you can come through and talk about perseverance. So when I say perseverance, does anyone want to volunteer? What does that mean? What does that mean? Yes.
Not giving up.
Not giving up. Okay. Any other takes? Yes. What's that?
Consistent effort.
I like that. Consistent effort. Yeah. So not giving up, consistent effort. That makes perfect sense because perseverance is kind of what gets you here. If you think about when you were a kid, really, really young, you had to learn how to walk, right? And it's not like a baby goes and starts crawling and then starts trying to walk and says, you know what? This walking thing isn't for me. I'm not going to do this. No, they get up again. That's perseverance. Again, when I talked to Mr. Scott, and he wanted me to talk about perseverance, the first person that came to mind was a guy named Roger Bannister. Have any of y'all heard of him? Roger Bannister? Do any of you run track? Yep, okay. So Roger Bannister is someone pretty important. So back in the 1950s, even before I was born, there was a guy named Roger Bannister. He was just a little bit older than you. I think he was like in his early 20s, maybe 25. At the time, there was a set record as far as how fast people could run, particularly in the mile. They said if you ran at a certain level, if you had the magical ability to run as fast as the speed of light, then certain things would happen. For instance, if you ran faster than a 4-minute mile, then your ears might start to pop, like you're going deep underwater. You know, the pressure from going deep underwater. Or if you ran faster than the 4-minute mile, then you might start to have issues breathing and your lungs might start to collapse, like you're going too far into outer space. This is what people believed. This was science. This was a known fact. And there was this guy named Roger Bannister. Again, a little bit older than you. And there was a meet, and he broke the 4-minute mile. He ran a mile in 4 minutes. You can respect that. I come from a long line of marathon runners and sprinters and all that. So I used to run myself, and that is amazing. That record was not broken until Roger Bannister. That's when it was recorded. I think it was 1954. Within a year, dozens of people, if not 100 people, all around the world also broke that record. Okay, let me make that clear. So until Roger Bannister in 1954 or so, people believed you could not beat the 4-minute mile. You cannot run a mile in 4 minutes. It was not possible. You would die. This young guy did it. And then within a year, hundreds of people did it around the world. So what happened? Did the science change? Right? Suddenly the science changed. Everything's safe now. Go. Were the scientists wrong? Well, obviously, because Roger just died a few years ago. Obviously, he lived a long life. No. The mindset changed. People believe that they can do it, so suddenly they started doing it. Isn't that amazing? So the things that you're working with, the things that you're thinking about, the things that you want to do with your life, even if it's what you want to do tomorrow, you know, what's tomorrow? Thursday? Even what you want to do on Thursday. That requires understanding what you want to do. And as I talked with some of you about a little bit earlier today, protecting that vision. Even though you're in high school, I believe you have a vision as far as how you want to show up in the world, how you want to create, how you want to be. That's what I think about with perseverance. There's an interesting guy named Chris Jones. He is into technology, but he also is really into food, like myself, because I'm into both. And so he makes technology for chefs. It's a company called Chef Steps. Chef Steps. I can never say that word. I saw him interviewed, and he talked about his dad. Now he's about my age, so he's talking about way back in the day when he was in high school or so. And his dad said, excuse me, Chris, don't worry about what you're going to do. Focus on who you want to be. Because what you want to do, by the time you start doing it, isn't going to it doesn't exist yet. Let me repeat that. Don't worry about what you're going to do. Worry about what you're going to be, because whatever you're going to do doesn't exist yet. Now, he was about your age. His dad's about my age. His dad knew that whatever job, whatever thing Chris was going to ultimately do, it wasn't on the map yet. So don't worry about this specific thing. I have to be a graphic designer for a magazine. That's the only way I can do it. Because 15, 20 years from now, that doesn't make any sense. Right? If you have a smartphone, right? You know, as the VP mentioned, I make apps. The apps that I made were developed about 5 or 6 years ago. And selling one of the companies about 5 years ago. The apps that you use on your phone, like Snapchat and so forth, they didn't exist 10 years ago. So where you're at right now, that's where perseverance comes in. Because if your perseverance is saying, I'm going to do this particular thing, quite literally 10 years ago, Snapchat didn't exist. Think about that. Uber didn't exist 15 years ago. I was living in San Francisco when it was started. It wasn't there. Do you get that? So perseverance, again, like Roger Bannister, isn't about saying, this is the world that we live in. This is how I'm going to fit into it. No. Perseverance is more about, this is how I'm going to show up in the world. This is the impact I want to make. And then I trust that whatever tools I need to make that impact, they will be there when I get there. Now, there's a few different ways that you can build that perseverance. It's not rocket science. There's actually things you can do. The first thing you can do is actually be ready so you don't have to get ready. I'm originally from South Jersey, and that's what people said on the streets a lot. Be ready so you don't have to get ready. What that means is that you can't be open and be ready for opportunities in your life if you've been sitting on the sidelines. It's like playing sports, and suddenly you're called in off the bench, but you haven't been practicing. It doesn't matter how great the opportunity is. You're not ready. When I was about my youngest son's age, he's 3, I actually started programming and messing with computers. This is way back in the day. This was a Commodore VIC-20. This is the Tandy computers, like way, way back in the day in the 70s. At that same time, I also got into writing, believe it or not. And I started writing and reading at a really early age. Again, I was age 3. At that period of time, and particularly as I started to get into school, something started to happen. I was fine, but the people around me were not. So if you want to understand, I had one end where it's like, I'm really into the writing. And they're like, okay, well, you need to hang out with the people that are quoting Shakespeare. You need to hang out with the journalists. You need to hang out with the people that read 20 books a day, the bookworms over in the library. Not my terms, but theirs. And I was like, but I also know how to program, and I can be really logical, and I like how systems work, and I understand I can take a computer apart and then figure out how it goes together. You know, I had this amazing amplifier system in my family's basement. I would take it apart. And so I could have a little bit more bass when I was listening to A Tribe Called Quest or whatever was hot at the time. So I understood the technology part too. So they were like, well, you need to hang out with the programmers then, and the nerds, and the electricians, and the people that are doing that, the engineers. And I was like, but I'm both. So then where do I belong? So I held on to both. I became a journalist, and I started writing about technology. Now, here's the thing. When you want to read the news, something that someone's written, what are you reading it on? You're reading it on your phone. When there's breaking news as far as something going on overseas or something that's going on here in Maumee or in Toledo next door, how are you getting that news? Through your laptop, through your computer, through your smartwatch. I got a watch right now. That obviously didn't exist when I was a kid, but now that's a place of power for me. And I don't mean that in a malicious way, but I mean I'm one of the few people that understands how to communicate and understands the technology. But if I went with the flow when I was a kid, I would have chosen a side. I wouldn't have understood the technology anymore because I'd be focused on the journalism. I wouldn't have understood how to communicate anymore because I'd be focused on the programming. I did both. I got ready before the time actually was here. So that's a key thing. And the groundwork for me speaking to you right now started when I was age 3. Like before I even knew y'all existed, before any of you actually existed. So having that kind of perspective to say, this is the impact I want to make on the world, this is my particular voice, this is how it's going to be expressed. That's what I mean by be ready so you don't have to get ready. You can't rush that process. You already have an idea as far as what impact you want to make, even if you don't know how you're going to make it. The second thing is, this is actually from Oprah Winfrey, is to always do the next best move. If you're not sure what to do with your life or what the next thing is, figure out where you want to go and then do the next move towards that. So if you know that you want to make music, and I'm really into music, so if you know you want to make music, then maybe it just starts with going to band practice today. And that's it. Not signing up for a bunch of classes, not playing all night, not joining a band, but just going to band practice today. That's the next step. Whether you want to have these big ambitions or you want to do something really small, the next step is always going to be going to band practice. So no matter what your vision is, look at the next step. It's always the same, right? And this is coming from Oprah, so she's dealt with some heavy stuff. So I'm going to trust her on that one. Finally, and this is probably my favorite, it's from an entrepreneur named Chase Jarvis, and he has a free website called creativelive.com, and there are like experts that will do free classes online to teach you things. So it's creativelive.com. I highly recommend it. But what he talks about is you need to create more than you consume. You need to create more than you consume. Do you understand where I'm going with that? A lot of the issues that we have, including myself, as far as looking at other people and wanting to be at a higher place, seeing people on Instagram or whatever the case may be, and seeing that they're doing amazing things and thinking that we're not. The best cure for that is to actually do stuff yourself. If you're really into, say, a new TV show, like Pretty Little Liars or whatever, you're into that show, why don't you try writing something that'll be like a fan fiction for that show? Why don't you organize a group online so y'all can talk about it, almost like a book club? That's the type of creation too. So you end up facilitating the very thing that you enjoy. That's a level of perseverance, because then it's not a matter of you just taking stuff in, but you actively creating that future and learning from those different things. I was talking to some of the folks that are here earlier in another group, and I was talking about how I used to be a DJ and how I didn't make that much money as a DJ. In fact, I probably lost money, as I mentioned in the previous class. But the things I was able to learn, like reading an audience, knowing when the rhythm is slowing down so people aren't on the dance floor, so I better pick it back up. Or I better put on that new Jay-Z because people are starting to fall asleep, so let me put that on. Even though I didn't get paid directly for that, even though I didn't have plans on being a professional DJ, there's still things that I learned from that experience. And that was my version of creating. I absolutely love music. Me becoming a DJ was me creating music in my own way. I think the most interesting thing as far as creating, as opposed to just consuming, is that you become incrementally better. And so if you end up working on something, whether it's playing an instrument, whether it's writing something in the case of me, whether it's even public speaking. I'm an okay public speaker. I used to be an awful one. The thing is that it's about making those incremental changes every single day. As we talked about in another class, it's not about having that perfection, but about moving closer and getting 1% better, as some people have said, every single day. You do that by showing up. That's where the perseverance comes in. If you're an athlete, that means you have to track every day. If you're a public speaker, that means you practice every day. If you're a writer, that means you keep going. If you, again, are a musician, then that means you play every afternoon or evening or whatever. You become focused on being better than your previous self. And when you start something, you're going to probably suck, especially compared to the people that you look up to. I look up to Seth Godin and Brene Brown and those other people that have been on the TED stage, which I've been on, but I'm humbled by them. But they've been doing their craft for 30 years. I just started. So then I practice every day, just like you can. That's the perseverance. Practicing even though you know right now you suck. And then one day you'll wake up and you'll be okay. And then the next day or a few days later, you'll wake up and you'll be okay. You'll be pretty good. And then maybe one day you'll actually be great. And then before you know it, you're able to beat your own 4-minute mile. Thank you.